600 feet down in the Taiwan Strait, cameras reveal something that shouldn't be possible. The USS Tang, America's most successful submarine of World War II, sitting on the ocean floor with her bow section crushed inward. But here's what makes this discovery so haunting. The damage isn't from a depth charge or a Japanese destroyer. It's from an American Mark 18 torpedo. Her own weapon, the 24th torpedo she fired on October 25, 1944, made a circular run and came back to kill her. Commander Richard O'Kane was the most decorated submarine officer in American naval history. In 5 war patrols, the Tang sank 24 Japanese ships, more confirmed kills than any other submarine in the Pacific. O'Kane was aggressive, brilliant, and fearless. His crew worshipped him. His tactics revolutionized submarine warfare. And on the night of October 24, 25, 1944, during his greatest attack run, his own torpedo betrayed him. The Tang had just sunk 2 Japanese ships in the Formosa Strait. She was lining up for a 3rd kill when torpedo number 24 left the tube, ran straight for about 20 seconds, then suddenly broached, turned left, and started coming back. O'Kane saw it on the surface, running hot and straight, heading directly for his submarine. He ordered emergency maneuvers. Full right rudder, all ahead emergency, but submarines don't turn on a dime, and Mark 18 torpedoes run at 46 knots. The torpedo struck the Tang's stern at 2:48 a.m. The explosion was catastrophic. The after torpedo room flooded instantly, killing everyone inside. The engine rooms flooded. The submarine went down like a stone, bow first, slamming into the ocean floor at 180 feet. Of the 87 men aboard, 78 died immediately, trapped in flooded compartments, killed by the explosion, or drowned as the submarine plunged. Only 9 men survived, including O'Kane, pulled from the water by the same Japanese destroyer they'd just been attacking. For 56 years, the Tang's exact location remained uncertain. The survivors knew approximately where she'd gone down, but not precisely. Then in 2000, a joint U.S.-Taiwan expedition found her, and what they discovered sitting in the Taiwan Strait wasn't just a submarine. It was evidence of the most successful boat in the Pacific Fleet, destroyed by the same weapon system that had made her legendary. This is the story of the U.S. Tang, the submarine that killed more enemy ships than any other, and was killed by herself. The USS Tang was launched on August 17, 1943, at Mare Island Naval Shipyard in California. She was a Balao-class submarine, 311 feet long, displacing 1,526 tons, surfaced, and 2,424 tons submerged. Her diesel-electric propulsion could push her to 20 knots on the surface and 9 knots submerged. She carried 24 torpedoes in 10 tubes, 6 forward, 4 aft, and mounted a 5-inch deck gun for surface engagements. But the Tang's real weapon wasn't her torpedoes or her guns. It was her commanding officer. Richard Hetherington O'Kane had served as executive officer on the USS Wahoo under the legendary Dudley Mush Morton. The Wahoo's aggressive tactics, surfacing at night to attack convoys at point-blank range, using the deck gun to finish off damaged ships, hunting destroyers instead of fleeing from them, were considered reckless by some and revolutionary by others. O'Kane learned everything Morton had to teach, and when he got his own command he took those lessons and refined them into something even more lethal. O'Kane believed that submarine warfare wasn't about being cautious. It was about being aggressive enough to terrify the enemy while being smart enough to survive. He trained his crew relentlessly. He developed new tactics for night surface attacks. He perfected the art of firing spreads, launching multiple torpedoes at calculated angles to ensure at least one would hit even if the target maneuvered. And he had an almost supernatural ability to read enemy movements, to anticipate what convoy commanders would do when under attack. The Tang's first war patrol began on January 22, 1944. O'Kane took her to the Caroline Islands, hunting Japanese shipping lanes. It was a shakedown cruise, a chance to see what the boat and crew could do. What they did was sink 5 ships totaling over 12,000 tons. It was an extraordinary debut. Most submarines took several patrols to achieve their first kill. The Tang came back from her first patrol as one of the most successful boats in the fleet. The second patrol was even better. O'Kane took the Tang into the East China Sea and the Yellow Sea, operating in waters so shallow and so heavily patrolled that most submarine commanders avoided them entirely. The Japanese assumed these areas were too dangerous for American submarines. O'Kane proved them wrong. He sank 6 ships totaling over 20,000 tons, including a 10,000-ton tanker that exploded so violently the Tang had to crash dive to avoid the debris raining down. But it was the third patrol that made the Tang legendary. June-July 1944. O'Kane took his boat into the waters off Japan itself, the enemy's home waters, the most heavily defended areas in the Pacific. He found a large convoy and attacked on the surface at night, firing spreads of torpedoes from such close range that his lookouts could see Japanese sailors on the decks of the ships he was sinking. He sank 10 ships in 1 week. 10. It was a record that would stand for the rest of the war. The Tang's tactics, during that third patrol, became textbook submarine warfare. O'Kane would approach convoys on the surface at night, using the submarine's low profile and dark paint to remain nearly invisible. He'd maneuver to get ahead of the convoy, then turn and fire down the columns of ships, maximizing the chances of multiple hits. When the escorts counterattacked, he'd dive, go deep and silent, and slip away. Then he'd surface, and do it again. The crew developed an almost telepathic coordination. The torpedo room crews could reload tubes in minutes. The fire control team could calculate targeting solutions faster than any other submarine in the fleet. The lookouts could spot targets and threats with uncanny accuracy. And O'Kane tied it all together with a command style that balanced aggression with calculated risk. He pushed hard, but he didn't push recklessly. Every attack was planned. Every maneuver was deliberate, and it worked. By the time the Tang returned from her third patrol, she'd sunk 17 ships. She was the most successful submarine in the Pacific. O'Kane was being compared to Morton, to the other legendary submarine skippers. His crew had a swagger that came from knowing they were the best. And when the Tang went into refit before her fourth patrol, the whole submarine force was watching to see what she'd do next. The fourth patrol was supposed to be routine by Tang standards. September-October 1944. The Philippines. Support the upcoming invasion by interdicting Japanese shipping. Find targets. Sink them. Come home. The Tang departed Pearl Harbor on September 27, 1944, with a full load of fuel, provisions, and 24 Mark 18 electric torpedoes. The Mark 18 was an improvement over the earlier Mark 14 torpedo that had plagued the submarine force early in the war. The Mark 14 had been notorious for running too deep, for having defective magnetic exploders, for being unreliable in ways that got submarines killed. The Mark 18, copied from captured German torpedoes, was supposed to fix all those problems. It ran on electric power, leaving no wake. It was more reliable. It had a better warhead, but it still had one fatal flaw that nobody had quite figured out. Occasionally, for reasons that were never fully understood, a Mark 18 would broach surface unexpectedly, and if it broached at the wrong angle, its gyroscopes could malfunction, causing it to turn in a circle. Circular runs were rare, but they happened. Submarine skippers knew about the risk. There were procedures for dealing with suspected circular runners. Dive immediately, get below the torpedo's running depth, hope it passes overhead or runs out of fuel. But at night, on the surface, in the middle of an attack, with multiple targets and escorts closing in, detecting a circular runner in time to evade was nearly impossible. The Tang spent October hunting in the Formosa Strait and the waters around the Philippines. She sank several ships, though the pickings were slimmer than on previous patrols. The Japanese were routing convoys differently, using smaller groups of ships with heavier escorts. The easy targets were gone. O'Kane had to work harder for each kill. On the night of October 23, 1944, the Tang found a small convoy heading north through the Formosa Strait. 2 transports escorted by a single destroyer. O'Kane maneuvered to get ahead of them, surfaced, and began his attack run. At 2:30 a.m. on October 24, he fired a spread of 3 torpedoes. 2 hit. Both transports erupted in flames and began sinking. The destroyers started hunting, but O'Kane had already reloaded and repositioned. By the early morning hours of October 25, the Tang had expended 22 of her 24 torpedoes. O'Kane had 2 left, both in the forward torpedo room, and he'd just spotted another small convoy, a transport, and a tanker with destroyer escort. This would be the Tang's final attack of the patrol. 2 torpedoes. 2 targets, make them count. O'Kane positioned the Tang for a surface attack at close range, his preferred method. The submarine was running on the surface, bow toward the targets, about 1,000 yards away. At 2:30 a.m., he fired torpedo number 23. It ran hot, straight, and normal, striking the transport. The ship exploded and started settling. 1 target down, 1 torpedo left. O'Kane adjusted his position slightly and at 2:48 a.m. ordered the firing of torpedo number 24, the Tang's last weapon. It was aimed at the tanker. A perfect setup. Everything by the book. The torpedo left tube 1 and for about 20 seconds everything seemed normal. The crew was already preparing to dive and clear the area. The attack was over. Time to go home. Then somebody on the bridge saw it. The torpedo's wake, visible on the surface, had broached and curved. Instead of running toward the target, it was running in an arc, and the arc was tightening. Coming around, coming back. O'Kane saw it immediately. His brain processed what was happening in the seconds it took for the torpedo to complete its turn. His own weapon was coming back to kill his submarine. He had maybe 30 seconds before impact. All ahead emergency. Right full rudder. The orders were instant. Automatic. But the Tang was already at full speed. Emergency power could only do so much. And submarines don't turn quickly. The rudder angle was increasing, the stern beginning to swing, but the torpedo was closing faster. 46 knots. Coming straight at the stern. The crew on the bridge watched the wake coming. Some men dove overboard, trying to get clear. Others stood frozen, watching death approach at nearly a mile a minute. O'Kane stayed at his post, still trying to maneuver, still trying to dodge, doing everything a submarine commander could do with the seconds he had left. The torpedo struck the Tang's stern at 2:48 a.m., right where the after torpedo room met the maneuvering room. The warhead, 600 pounds of Torpex explosive, detonated on contact. The explosion was catastrophic. The after torpedo room was obliterated instantly, killing all 9 men inside. The maneuvering room flooded in seconds. The engine rooms directly forward of the explosion were breached. Seawater poured through ruptured bulkheads. The submarine's stern, heavy with flooding and structural damage, pulled the Tang down. She wasn't designed to sink bow first. Submarines normally sink stern first because the engine and battery spaces are heavier. But with the stern already flooded and sinking, the Tang went down at a steep angle, bow pointed at the ocean floor, falling like a dropped stone. Inside the submarine, the men forward of the damage knew they were dead. The forward torpedo room crew could hear the flooding behind them, could feel the boat's angle steepening. Some tried to dog the hatches, to seal themselves in and hope for rescue. Others grabbed malfunctioned lungs, primitive escape devices, and tried to get to escape hatches. But the submarine was falling too fast. The pressure was equalizing too quickly, and 180 feet isn't deep enough to survive without training and luck. The Tang hit bottom bow first, at approximately 2:50 a.m. The impact drove the bow into the soft bottom sediment. The forward torpedo room, already under enormous stress from the angle and depth, partially collapsed. 15 men were still alive in the forward sections when the submarine hit bottom. They had minutes to live, maybe less. In the after sections, there were no survivors. The explosion and immediate flooding had killed everyone aft of the control room within seconds. But in the forward torpedo room, 5 men were still conscious. They had malfunctioned lungs. They had training, and they had one chance: try to escape from 180 feet. Submarine escape from that depth was considered nearly impossible. The pressure at 180 feet is over 80 pounds per square inch. You have to equalize the pressure inside the submarine by flooding the compartment you're in, then open the escape hatch against that pressure, then ascend slowly enough that nitrogen in your blood doesn't kill you with decompression sickness, but fast enough that you don't run out of air or pass out from CO2 buildup. The success rate was abysmal, but it was the only option. Of the 5 men who attempted escape from the forward torpedo room, only 4 reached the surface. One man's Momsen lung failed during the ascent. He drowned 50 feet from air. The 4 who made it to the surface were immediately spotted by the Japanese destroyer that had been hunting them, the same destroyer whose convoy they'd just attacked. On the bridge, when the torpedo struck, 8 men were blown off by the explosion, or dove overboard, trying to escape. Of those 8, 5 survived the explosion, and managed to stay afloat in the oil-covered water. Commander O'Kane was one of them. For hours they floated, watching Japanese ships patrol overhead, knowing that if they were spotted, they might be shot in the water or left to drown. At dawn, the Japanese destroyer picked them up. All 9 survivors, 4 from the forward torpedo room escape, 5 from the bridge, were pulled from the water. They were the only men to survive from a crew of 87, and they were pulled from the ocean by the same enemy they'd been trying to kill. The Japanese didn't know they'd just rescued the commander and crew of the most successful American submarine in the Pacific. They didn't know these prisoners had sunk 24 ships. All they knew was that a submarine had attacked their convoy and then sunk itself somehow. The prisoners weren't talking. O'Kane and his men gave only name, rank, and serial number. They certainly weren't going to explain that their own torpedo had killed them. The 9 survivors spent the rest of the war in Japanese POW camps. They were interrogated, beaten, starved. O'Kane was tortured trying to get him to reveal submarine tactics. He refused. Some of his men didn't survive captivity. 3 died of mistreatment, disease, and starvation before Japan surrendered. Only 6 Tang crew members lived to see liberation in August 1945. After the war, O'Kane received the Medal of Honor for his actions during the Tang's 5 war patrols. He was the only submarine commander to receive the Medal of Honor who survived to wear it. The citation didn't mention how the Tang sank. That information was classified for decades. Officially, she'd been sunk by enemy action. The truth that she'd been destroyed by her own torpedo was considered too embarrassing, too damaging to morale, too complicated to explain. But submariners knew. Within the silent service, the story of the Tang was told as a warning about the unpredictability of torpedoes, about the risks of surface attacks, about how quickly things could go catastrophically wrong. The circular run that killed the Tang became part of submarine lore, a reminder that even the best crew, with the best commander, could be killed by their own weapons. For 56 years, the Tang rested in the Taiwan Strait. The survivors knew approximately where she'd gone down, latitude and longitude estimates based on the attack position and the Japanese destroyer's location. But exact coordinates were uncertain. The Taiwan Strait is heavily trafficked, politically sensitive, and difficult to survey. Nobody was looking for the Tang. Nobody had the resources or the permission to search. Then in 2000, a joint expedition between the United States and Taiwan began systematic surveys of known World War II shipwreck sites in the strait. The Tang was on their list, but finding her would be difficult. The strait is over 100 miles wide, and the search area based on 1944 estimates was large. They needed luck, good equipment, and time. Using side-scan sonar, the expedition team mapped sections of the seafloor, looking for anomalies that matched submarine profiles. In late 2000, they detected something at approximately 180 feet depth, the right depth based on survivor accounts. The profile was submarine-sized. The location was within the estimated search area. They deployed an ROV to investigate. The footage that came back confirmed it. A submarine, sitting upright on the bottom, bow section damaged and partially buried in sediment, stern section showing catastrophic damage, consistent with a torpedo explosion. The configuration matched Balau-class specifications. The damage pattern matched survivor descriptions. It was the Tang. The discovery was officially confirmed in 2002, after additional surveys and comparisons with historical records. The wreck showed clear evidence of the circular run impact. The stern damage was localized and explosive, not consistent with depth charge patterns or ramming. The bow damage was from impact with the seafloor, not from enemy action. Every detail supported the survivor accounts. The Tang had been destroyed by her own 24th torpedo. The wreck site is now designated as a war grave. The 78 men who died with the Tang remain at their posts. The submarine sits at a depth that's accessible to technical divers, but the site is protected by international maritime law and Taiwanese territorial claims. No salvage is permitted. No unauthorized diving. The Tang is a memorial now, not just a wreck. But the discovery also provided closure for the surviving crew members and their families. For decades, they'd known only approximately where the Tang had gone down. Now they had coordinates. They had confirmation. They had evidence that the story they'd been telling, the story of the circular run, was documented in steel and sediment. The Tang's legacy is complicated. She was the most successful submarine in the American fleet, credited with 24 confirmed kills. Her tactics influenced submarine doctrine for the rest of the war and beyond. Commander O'Kane trained a generation of submarine officers who went on to command their own boats. The Tang's aggressive night surface attacks became the template for how to hunt convoys. But she was also killed by her own torpedo, by a weapon system that, despite improvements, still had fatal flaws, by a circular run that happened because gyroscopes could fail and torpedoes could broach, and sometimes the weapon you fired could turn around and kill you. It was the ultimate irony. The submarine that had sent 24 enemy ships to the bottom was sent to the bottom by itself. O'Kane lived until 1994, dying at age 83. He never stopped advocating for submarine forces, never stopped pushing for better torpedoes, better training, better tactics, but he also never forgot the 78 men who died under his command. In interviews, he always emphasized that the Tang's success was the crew's achievement, not his alone. And he always mentioned that if the torpedo hadn't malfunctioned, if it had run true, the Tang would have come home from her 5th patrol with 25 kills and all hands alive. The Tang sits in the Taiwan Strait at 180 feet, deeper than recreational diving but accessible to technical teams. The bow points toward the bottom where it struck after the fatal torpedo hit. The stern shows the explosive damage that killed the submarine. And somewhere inside, in the forward torpedo room and the control room and the crew spaces, are the remains of 78 men who were the best submarine crew in the Pacific Fleet until their own weapon betrayed them. The story of the USS Tang is taught at submarine school as a lesson about equipment reliability, about the dangers of surface attacks, about how even the best crews can be killed by circumstances beyond their control. But it's also taught as an example of what aggressive, well-trained, brilliantly commanded submarine warfare looked like. The Tang sank more ships than any other submarine. She revolutionized tactics. She proved that American submarines could dominate the Pacific if they had the right commanders and the right tactics. And then she proved that in submarine warfare, your own weapons can be just as dangerous as the enemy's. 600 feet down in the Taiwan Strait, the Tang waits. The submarine that killed 24 enemy ships and was killed by itself. The boat that proved American submarine warfare could work and proved that even the best equipment can fail at the worst possible moment. Commander O'Kane's greatest triumph and final tragedy, preserved in steel and shadow where the Formosa Strait meets the Pacific. She earned her place in history twice. Once by being the best, once by showing that even the best can be destroyed by their own hand.